Clara's world was a swirl of glitter and rebellion, all seen through the eyes of one man, Elvis Presley. At 16, her bedroom walls were practically wallpapered with his smiling face caught mid-swivel, mid-song. Records of Jailhouse Rock and Heartbreak Hotel were stacked high next to her record player, worn thin from endless spins. She knew every lyric, every guitar riff, every soulful sigh. Elvis wasn't just a singer to Clara. He was a phenomenon, a feeling, a whole universe, wrapped in a velvet suit. He was pure electricity, a burst of energy that seemed to leap right off the record and fill her small room. When Elvis sang, Clara felt like anything was possible. He was so different from the quiet, predictable life she knew in her small town. He represented freedom, excitement, a world bursting with color and sound. Sometimes she'd close her eyes, her hand pressed to the record player, and imagine herself right there in the audience, bathed in the spotlight, part of the roaring crowd. Her biggest dream, the one she hugged tight to her chest every night, was to see him perform live, just once. Then came the news blasting from the radio like a trumpet fanfare. Elvis was going on tour, and one of his stops was the big city, only 2 hours away. Clara practically dropped the breakfast plate she was holding. Her heart hammered against her ribs. A wild drum solo. This wasn't just a concert. It was an event, a pilgrimage. The king himself, so close she could almost taste the excitement. Convincing her parents, however, was going to be a tougher gig than Elvis himself. A rock and roll show, Clara, with all that screaming, her mother had said, raising an eyebrow. Her father just grunted, eyes still buried in the newspaper. They weren't against Elvis exactly, but they saw him as a passing fad, a noisy distraction. Clara pleaded, reasoned, and promised. She offered to do extra chores, wash the car every weekend, even give up her allowance for a month. This wasn't just a show. It was her chance, maybe her only chance, to witness history. The tickets were expensive, precious commodities. They sold out in minutes, snatched up by eager fans across the country. Clara heard stories of people camping out for days, lining up around city blocks. Her hopes dipped. How could a 16-year-old in a quiet town possibly get a ticket? But she refused to give up. She scoured the newspaper, asked every older kid she knew. Her parents, seeing her unwavering determination, finally relented a little. Her father made a few calls, and one afternoon he walked in, holding a small white envelope. "Don't get your hopes up," he'd said, trying to sound gruff, but a small smile played on his lips. "They're pretty far back balcony." See, Clara ripped open the envelope. There it was, in bold black letters. Elvis Presley, a ticket, her ticket. She screamed a joyous sound that startled the family cat. It didn't matter if she was in the last row of the balcony. She was going. She was actually going to see Elvis. The days leading up to the concert crawled by. Every moment felt like an eternity. Clara imagined the roar of the crowd, the blinding lights, the magic of his voice filling the arena. She rehearsed her dream scenario in her head. Maybe she'd catch a glimpse of him backstage, or maybe, just maybe, he'd look up at the balcony and wave. She knew it was a long shot, a crazy dream, but holding that ticket made it feel just a little bit closer. She polished her shoes, picked out her best dress, and counted down the hours, her heart a frantic drumbeat of pure anticipation. The day of the concert finally dawned, clear and bright, but to Clara it felt like the sun itself was shining just for her. She woke up with a jolt, adrenaline already buzzing through her veins. Breakfast was a blur, her stomach too full of butterflies to eat. She carefully selected her outfit, a simple but pretty blue dress, one that made her feel a little grown-up, a little special. Her hair was curled just so, and she even dared to put on a touch of lipstick. Every detail mattered tonight. The drive to the city felt endless, but the moment they pulled up to the arena, the atmosphere hit her like a physical force. Even from the parking lot, she could hear the muffled roar of the crowd, a low hum of anticipation that sent shivers down her spine. The air itself seemed to crackle with excitement. Thick with the scent of popcorn, hot dogs, and thousands of eager fans, people were spilling out of cars, laughing, chatting, all dressed in their best. Some even wearing their hair, like Elvis. Finding her seat felt like navigating a sea of surging energy. The arena was immense, a cavernous space filled with thousands upon thousands of people. Her tickets, as her father had warned, were indeed in the balcony high up. But as she settled into her seat, she realized it didn't matter. She had a perfect if distant view of the stage which gleamed under the spotlights. Waiting, she could feel the collective pulse of the crowd. A single living organism all waiting for the same thing. The lights dimmed, plunging the arena into a sudden hushed darkness. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Then a single spotlight hit the stage, illuminating the microphone stand. A low bluesy guitar riff started slow and deliberate, building in intensity. The roar began a low growl that quickly crescendoed into a deafening scream, and then he was there. Elvis? He burst onto the stage like a supernova, a flash of white jumpsuit, his hair perfectly coiffed, his smile a dazzling beacon. The crowd erupted. Clara felt a primal scream tear from her throat, lost in the symphony of thousands of voices. He was even more magnificent in person than in her wildest dreams. His movements were fluid, electrifying, a mix of raw energy and effortless cool. He commanded the stage, owning every inch of it, every single person in the arena. He sang and his voice filled the vast space, deep and rich, hitting every note with perfect control. Clara watched, mesmerized, tears stinging her eyes. She wasn't just hearing a song. She was feeling it, experiencing. His hips swayed, his legs bent, his hands moved in that signature style, captivating every gaze. The energy was palpable, a current passing from him to the crowd and back again. She sang along, danced in her seat, completely lost in the magic. This was what she had dreamed of, multiplied by 1,000. As the concert continued, Elvis started to move closer to the edge of the stage, engaging directly with the fans in the front rows. He threw out a few scarves, their white silk fluttering through the air like doves snatched up by eager hands below. A flicker of disappointment touched Clara. From her high perch, she knew there was no way she could ever catch one. She was too far away, too high up. The scarves were for the lucky ones down below. Still, she cheered, she screamed, she absorbed every single moment, cherishing the sheer joy of being in the same room as her idol. It was more than enough, or so she thought. The concert was nearing its electrifying peak. Elvis was absolutely on fire, his voice soaring, his movements a blur of pure showmanship. He was working the crowd, leaning into their screams, feeding off their energy. He strutted to one side of the stage, shaking hands with a few lucky fans in the very first row, then moved to the other, flashing that famous smile that could melt glaciers. The air was thick with the scent of excitement and the raw emotion of thousands of adoring fans. Clara was on her feet, screaming, her throat raw, completely swept up in the pandemonium. She jumped and clapped her heart a drum solo against her ribs. She felt a connection even from her distant perch, as if his voice was speaking directly to her. As he spun and landed a perfect pose, his gaze seemed to sweep over the entire arena. For a split second her eyes met his. It was probably just a trick of the lights, or wishful thinking, but in that instant she felt a jolt. As if he truly saw her, a sudden, reckless impulse seized her. It was crazy, impossible, but the words were already forming in her mind. Everyone was screaming his name or just general words of adoration. But she had a specific request, one that felt like a wild, desperate gamble. She took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the electric air of the arena. All the shyness, all the fear of looking foolish vanished. This was her chance. "Elvis, your scarf!" she screamed, her voice surprisingly loud even to her own ears. She cupped her hands around her mouth, pointing vaguely towards herself. hoping he'd somehow hear her, somehow pick her out from the roaring ocean of sound and people. It was a needle in a haystack, a shot in the dark, but she had to try. This was Elvis. This was the moment the world seemed to narrow to a pinpoint. To her utter disbelief, he paused. Mid-swivel, his head turned and his eyes, clear and blue even from this distance, found hers again. And he actually nodded. She looked around, dazed. People in her section were starting to notice. Whispers rippled through the rows around her. "Did you see that?" He looked right at her. A few people pointed their expressions, a mix of disbelief and hopeful curiosity. The low murmur of the crowd intensified around her, a buzz of wonder. Elvis didn't immediately come over. He continued his song, his performance unbroken, but his gaze kept flicking back to her section, a subtle reassurance. Then as the song ended and the applause thundered, he walked towards the edge of the stage, right below her balcony section. He leaned down, speaking to a burly security guard, pointing up. Clara's breath caught in her throat. The impossible was becoming real. He was actually going to do it. The king was going to respond to her wild, hopeful plea. The seconds stretched into an eternity. Elvis was at the edge of the stage, talking to a security guard, his eyes still occasionally glancing up at Clara's section. The buzz around her intensified, a mix of disbelief and frenzied excitement. People were standing on their seats, straining to see. "He's coming this way," someone shrieked, and a wave of anticipation washed over the crowd. Then he started moving. Past the security barrier, past the outstretched hands of the front row fans, he made his way closer to where Clara stood, trembling. The roar of the crowd intensified, a collective gasp and surge of energy. People were shouting his name, reaching out, desperate, for a touch, a glance. But he kept his eyes surprisingly on her. It felt like a tunnel had formed, connecting just the two of them in that vast, chaotic arena. He reached her section directly below her, in the balcony. A security guard helped him lean over the barrier, bridging the gap between stage and audience. Clara's hands were shaking so hard she thought she might drop whatever he gave her. She could see the sheen of sweat on his brow, the glint of his sequined jumpsuit, the sheer power radiating from him. He was even more breathtaking. Up close, he paused for a moment, his eyes so incredibly blue, locking onto hers. A warm, genuine smile lit up his face, crinkling the corners of his eyes. Then slowly, deliberately, he reached up and untied the white silk scarf from around his neck. Clara watched, mesmerized as he peeled it away. It was damp, clinging to his skin, clearly soaked with the effort of his performance. The light caught the sheen of moisture on the fabric, making it seem almost alive. He held it out, extending his hand towards her. A security guard on the balcony side, who had been alerted, gently guided Clara forward, helping her reach over the railing. Their fingers brushed. The contact was brief but electric, sending a jolt through Clara's entire body. The scarf was warm, almost hot, and surprisingly heavy with sweat. The faint scent of his cologne, mixed with the musky smell of his exertion, filled her senses. "Here you go, sweetheart," he said, his voice a little hoarse from singing, but gentle and kind. His smile deepened, a silent blessing. Gave a quick, reassuring nod, a final direct look that said, "This is for you." Then the moment was over. He turned, the crowd surged, and he moved back towards the stage, disappearing into the dazzling lights. Clara stood there utterly stunned, clutching the sweat-stained scarf to her chest. It was real. It was warm. It smelled of him. It was the most precious thing she had ever owned. A tangible piece of a dream come true. The roar of the crowd was back, but now it was for her, for the girl who had just been given a piece of the king. The rest of the concert was a blur. Clara held the scarf tight, clutching it against her chest, like a precious, fragile bird. She barely heard the final songs, barely saw Elvis take his bows. Her mind was reeling, replaying that one impossible moment over and over again. The touch of his fingers, his warm smile, the simple, kind words. "Here you go, sweetheart." It was real. She had proof. Leaving the arena was like floating on air. The throng of people, the noisy streets, the blare of car horns, None of it could touch the bubble of wonder she was in. Her parents were waiting, their faces a mix of concern and excited curiosity. "Clara, what happened? We saw him lean over." Is that his scarf?" her mother exclaimed, her eyes wide. Clara nodded, unable to speak, just holding up the damp, crumpled silk. Her father clapped her on the shoulder. A rare show of open pride. Back home, the quiet of her bedroom felt more real after the roar of the arena. Clara, carefully, almost reverently, laid the scarf out on her bed. It was still warm, still damp with sweat. She ran her fingers over the soft silk, tracing the faint patterns of moisture. It smelled of him. A mix of his cologne, the faintest hint of something sweet, and the undeniable tang of honest exertion. It was a powerful, intimate scent, completely unlike anything she had ever encountered. It wasn't just a piece of cloth. It was a tangible piece of that incredible night, a direct link to the magic she had witnessed. It was the proof that dreams sometimes actually came true. Her hero, the king himself, had looked at her, heard her, and given her a piece of himself. It felt like a secret, a blessing, something uniquely hers. She carefully folded it, still warm, and held it to her cheek, for a moment feeling a wave of overwhelming emotion, tears, quiet and joyous, slipped down her face. The scarf became more than a souvenir. It became a symbol. It represented the power of a simple, direct connection. It showed her that even the biggest stars could be kind, that a moment of genuine human interaction could transcend fame and adulation. Holding it, she felt a new sense of belonging, a quiet confidence she hadn't possessed before. She, Clara, the girl from the small town, had been singled out by Elvis. It was like she carried a piece of his incredible energy with her, now a secret power that would always remind her of the magic in the world. Clara knew the scarf was too precious to simply hang on her wall or leave lying around. It wasn't just a celebrity trinket, it was a relic, a piece of a moment that felt sacred. She found a small, antique wooden box, lined it carefully with soft white tissue paper, and gently laid the scarf inside. It was to be her secret, a private treasure. Only she would know its full story, its full weight, its quiet power. It became her personal source of comfort and inspiration. When the world outside her window felt dull, or when the pressures of school and teenage life started to feel overwhelming, she would retreat to her room. She'd lock the door, pull the box from its hiding spot under her bed, and carefully lift the lid. The ritual was always the same. She would slowly unfold the tissue paper, revealing the soft white silk. As she lifted it, the faint scent would waft up that unique mix of cologne, sweat, and something else, something indefinably Elvis. She would hold it gently, sometimes just letting it drape over her hands, sometimes bringing it close to her face, eyes closed. In those moments, the memory of that night flooded back as vivid as if it had happened yesterday. She'd remember the roar of the crowd, the blinding lights, the electricity in the air. She'd feel the fleeting brush of his fingers, hear his gentle words, see his warm smile. It wasn't just a memory. It was a re-experiencing. And with it came a wave of pure elation, a quiet sense of peace. The doubts and worries that had been bothering her would recede, replaced by the warmth of that unforgettable connection. The scarf didn't just bring comfort, it fueled her. It reminded her that extraordinary things could happen, that magic existed in the everyday. It made her feel a little braver, a little more adventurous. She found herself picking up her guitar more often, trying to learn new chords, imagining herself on a stage, feeling the music. She started sketching more, trying to capture the energy she felt from Elvis, the dynamic lines of his movements. It wasn't about becoming famous, but about finding her own voice, her own creativity. The scarf was a silent, comforting presence in her life, a constant reminder of her own strength and determination. It was a testament to the idea that if you dared to ask, if you dared to dream sometimes, just sometimes, the universe would answer. It was more than just a piece of cloth. It was a whisper of possibility, a tangible piece of wonder reminding her that even a simple scarf, soaked with sweat, could hold a universe of meaning. The magic of the scarf couldn't erase all of life's challenges. One particularly tough week arrived with a looming history exam, a major presentation in English, and a sudden awkward misunderstanding with her best friend, Sarah. Clara felt overwhelmed, stretched thin, and completely drained. The words for her presentation wouldn't come. The dates for the exams swirled into a confusing mess in her head. And the silence between her and Sarah felt heavier than any textbook. She slumped onto her bed, a defeated sigh escaping her lips. Self-doubt. A nasty little whisper started to creep into her mind. What if I fail? What if Sarah never talks to me again? Maybe I'm just not good enough. She felt small and insignificant, a sharp contrast to the exhilarating feeling of being at the Elvis concert. The weight of her problems felt immense, threatening to swallow her whole. Her gaze fell on the small, unassuming wooden box tucked under her bed. For a moment, she hesitated. Was it silly to rely on a scarf for comfort? But the memory of that night, of the strength she had felt, tugged at her. Slowly, she reached for the box. Pulling it out, she opened the lid, revealing the neatly folded silk. The faint, familiar scent filled the air, a whisper from a moment of pure magic. She lifted the scarf, letting it unfold in her hands, its softness, a balm to her troubled mind. She closed her eyes, clutching the fabric, and let herself drift back to that night. She saw the bright lights, heard the roar of the crowd, felt the energy emanating from the stage. Most importantly, she saw Elvis's kind eyes, heard his gentle voice, felt the brush of his fingers as he handed her the damp silk. It wasn't just about Elvis, it was about her. It was about the courage she had found to call out to him in that enormous crowd. It was about his unexpected kindness, his willingness to connect with a single fan. It reminded her that she had been brave that night, that she had dared to ask for something impossible, and it had been given to her. The scarf wasn't a magical solution, but it was a tangible symbol of resilience, a reminder that extraordinary things could happen when you faced your fears and reached out with a renewed sense of purpose. Clara sat up. The weight of her problems didn't vanish, but they suddenly seemed less insurmountable. She wouldn't fail. She wouldn't give up on Sarah. Taking a deep breath, she pulled out her history textbook and began to read, her mind surprisingly clearer. Later, she started writing her presentation, finding the words flowing more easily. And the next day, she approached Sarah, her voice steady as she asked to talk. The scarf hadn't solved her problems, but it had given her the strength and the belief in herself to tackle them head-on. Its true power, she realized, wasn't in its famous owner, but in what it represented for her. For months, the scarf remained Clara's closely guarded secret. Not even Sarah, her best friend since kindergarten, knew about it. It wasn't that Clara didn't trust Sarah. It was more that the scarf felt so intensely personal, so profoundly magical, that she worried sharing it might somehow lessen its power, or that others wouldn't understand. It was her secret source of strength, her private connection to a dream. But one afternoon, Sarah came over, her shoulders slumped, her usual bright eyes clouded with worry. She was struggling with a difficult family situation, feeling overwhelmed and hopeless. Clara listened, her heart aching for her friend. She wanted to help, to offer comfort, but words felt inadequate. As Sarah spoke about feeling like nothing good ever happened, like life was just a series of struggles, Clara's gaze drifted to the wooden box hidden under her bed. A strong impulse urged her to share. Sarah needed to believe in magic and kindness and the unexpected. This wasn't just a story about Elvis. It was a story about connection, about daring to dream, and about receiving an incredible gift. Carefully, Clara interrupted Sarah. I have something to show you, she said, her voice a little hesitant. Something I've never shown anyone else. Sarah looked up, curious, a flicker of interest in her tired eyes. Clara explained the story from the beginning. Her obsession with Elvis, the wild dream of seeing him live, the impossible concert ticket. Sarah listened, captivated, her own troubles momentarily forgotten. Then, Clara pulled out the wooden box. With trembling hands, she opened it, revealing the neatly folded silk. Sarah's eyes widened, her mouth falling open. "Is that no way? Is that the scarf?" she whispered, her voice full of disbelief and awe. Clara nodded, carefully lifting the scarf and holding it out. "He gave it to me," she said softly, and recounted the moment, screening out, his eyes meeting hers. The nod, his walking over, the feel of the damp silk, his kind words. Sarah's expression morphed from disbelief to sheer wonder. She reached out a hesitant finger, tracing the faint outline of a fold. It's real," she breathed, almost reverently. They sat for what felt like hours talking about it, about the sheer impossibility and beauty of that moment. Sarah asked every detail, her face shining with excitement. Sarah's reaction was everything Clara had hoped for. There was no envy, only pure, unadulterated awe and genuine understanding. "Clara, that's incredible," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "You actually got a piece of him, a piece of that magic." Sharing the story and the scarf itself didn't diminish its power. It amplified it. It deepened their friendship, creating a shared secret, a bond of wonder. The scarf was no longer just Clara's comfort. It became a symbol for both of them, a testament to the belief that, even when things were tough, extraordinary things could still happen. And kindness could come from the most unexpected places. It reminded Sarah that magic existed, which was exactly what she needed to hear. Years rolled by, as they always do, swift and relentless. Clara graduated high school, her head filled with dreams and the quiet confidence that the scarf had instilled in her. She went off to college, then started her first job, navigating the complexities of adulthood. The world outside changed, too. Elvis's career evolved, the music landscape shifted, and new stars rose and fell. But for Clara, his music remained a constant, a comforting soundtrack to her life. The scarf, of course, remained. It was still tucked away in its special wooden box, carefully preserved. It wasn't something she took out weekly anymore, or even monthly. The immediate thrill of having received it had softened into a deeper, more profound appreciation. It was there, a quiet, comforting presence, a touchstone to a moment that had irrevocably shaped her. When she did take it out, perhaps on a quiet anniversary of the concert or during a moment of deep reflection, the memories would flood back with astonishing clarity. It wasn't just about the celebrity encounter anymore. It was about her 16-year-old self, full of innocent hope and daring. It was about the moment she found the courage to shout out, and the unexpected kindness of a man who could have simply ignored her. It was a key memory from her youth, a touchstone to a time of pure, unadulterated joy and belief in the extraordinary. The scarf became a symbol of personal growth. It reminded her of her youthful passion, her ability to dream big, and the surprising ways life could deliver on those dreams. It taught her about the lasting impact of simple gestures of kindness, about how one moment could resonate through a lifetime. She understood now that its value wasn't in the celebrity status of the object itself, but in the unique human connection it represented. It was a tangible thread connecting her present self to her past self, a piece of her own story intertwined with a legend. She understood that the dampness of sweat on the silk wasn't gross. It was authentic, was the mark of his effort, his passion, his raw humanity on stage. It made the gift even more personal, more real. The scarf, once a symbol of an unreachable idol, had transformed into a potent reminder that even the most famous among us are just people, capable of incredible kindness, and that magic could indeed exist in the unexpected, sweat-stained moments of life. It was a quiet, profound legacy, tucked away in a simple wooden box. Clara was older now, her hair silvered, her steps a little slower, but her eyes still held that youthful spark. The wooden box, slightly more worn but still carefully lined, remained a treasured possession. It had moved with her through different homes, through different phases of life. It was no longer just a memory. It was a piece of her personal history, a silent testament to a pivotal moment. She often shared the story now, especially with her grandchildren. Their eyes would widen in awe as she recounted the tale of the concert, the roaring crowd, and the unbelievable moment Elvis Presley had given her the very scarf from his neck. She'd always emphasized the detail about the sweat, explaining that it made the gift even more real, more personal. He was performing his heart out, she'd tell them, and he still took a moment for me. She'd explain what the scarf truly meant. It wasn't about fame or celebrity worship. It was about connection. It was about the kindness of a busy man who took a moment to acknowledge a single fan in a sea of thousands. It was about the power of a simple, unexpected gesture to create a lasting impact. It taught me that magic happens, she'd say, her voice soft with remembrance. But you have to be brave enough to ask for it, and open enough to receive it. The sweat-stained scarf had become more than just a souvenir. It was a family heirloom, a story passed down through generations. It represented the enduring power of music, the possibility of dreams coming true, and the profound importance of human connection. It was a reminder that even in the biggest moments, the smallest acts of kindness can shine the brightest. Clara would sometimes take the scarf, out the silk now faded with age, but still retaining a faint, ghostly scent of that electrifying night. She'd hold it feeling the texture, remembering the warmth it had held so many years ago. That one sweat-stained scarf given in a moment of pure performance had shaped her life in subtle but profound ways. It had given her confidence, taught her about the unexpected generosity of the world, and reminded her to always believe in the extraordinary. The magic of that night and of that simple, sweat-soaked scarf lived on, a silent testament to the enduring power of a dream come true.